Before the Riderflex podcast episode of the day, a quick word from our sponsor and friends at Marketing 360.
Try the #1 marketing platform for small business. Everything you need from design to marketing to CRM. Learn more at marketing360.com. Marketing 360. Fuel your brand.
I'm in Colorado, so north in between Denver and Fort Collins.
Okay.
Yeah. Yourself right now, where you at? You outside of Pittsburgh?
Yeah. Yep.
Now, is that because you were a West Virginia boy? How's that work?
No, so I grew up in Pittsburgh, went to WVU, and then I ended up living in Phoenix, California, and Fort Lauderdale. Okay. That's where I got the businesses started. But yeah, back home to Pittsburgh. I mean, it's when you're from here, it's hard to stay away, you know.
But I
surprisingly,
I hear like there's a little bit of accent in there, like from when you were your years. Did you live in West Virginia for 4 years when you went?
No,
to school
that's my Pittsburghese that you're hearing.
Okay,
that's what it is. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's definitely not West Virginia. That's for sure. You hear a West Virginia accent, you know it.
Well, I was listening. You sound a little bit. I don't know if anybody's ever told you this. You sound a little bit like Harry Connick Jr. Has anybody ever told you that?
About 25 times.
Okay.
I've had that. I get that. I look like Bon Jovi, which is weird to me because I don't think so. But girls, I almost got backstage at a concert because people thought I was his brother. And yeah, I do get the Harry Connick Jr. thing, surprisingly, which is interesting. So good catch.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, shit, we're already rolling, so we'll just keep going here.
Good.
Tell us, Russ, a little bit about, the person, early years, family, mom, dad, siblings, where you grew up. Just give us some early stuff before we.
Yeah. So I was the oldest son, 5 kids. We had 4 boys, and then a girl was the youngest. Okay. My father was an entrepreneur that started it's basically the country's largest privately held security company at one point. They were the 6th largest overall at one point behind ADT and the big guys.
Wow.
I got to see that growing up. I remember every day my dad would leave in the morning and I'd watch him drive away, and, it's probably 12 hours later, 13 hours later, he would get back. And, he was in my life, but work, he cut everything off for work. Right. And I got to see that. And early, work was something that you just have to do. Ends up, what happened was there's a couple things that kind of created who I am. My grandfather was a magician. So I was, as the oldest grandchild, I was able to see how a room was set up. Right. So, and I talk about this in my book, which we'll probably get into later, but yes. When you're a kid and a magician says to you, hey, listen, I'm going to put you in this box, I'm going to cut you in half. You're really not going to be cut in half, but the crowd's going to think that. You don't really, kind of goes over your head until you hear the crowd go, and you realize that they did something that created this illusion, right? So seeing that early and then seeing how my dad worked and being part of my dad's magic trick, basically, when he would work the home shows and do things like that, he would bring me there. So at 5, 6, and 7 years old, much like Ron Popeil, the set it and forget it guy, that did the rotisserie thing, he got to be part of his dad's thing in the early days. One of the things that really affected me was Billy Mays. If you remember Billy Mays, the OxyClean guy. Hey, I'm Billy Mays.
Right.
Billy Mays was another guy from McKees Rocks, PA, which is where my father and my family was from. Okay. And Billy every year had the booth across from us at the home show. And this is way before he was famous. This is just, he was a guy buying things from China and selling them, for 10 times what he paid for them, right?
I see. So
this year, specifically, Billy was selling mops that were called a wash-o-matic. And I was trying to figure out what was he doing to these people that every single person was buying 2 of these mops, whereas my dad had to talk to 1,400 people before someone bought a security system. And I'm watching it, and here a couple walked past me, and the wife had 2 in her hand, and the husband had 2 in his hand, and the wife looked at the husband and said, it really stinks that you can only buy 2 of these. And it hit me that he was moving the cards around so that they picked the card he wanted, right? Because I had that much exposure to magic and things like that. So I walked up to Billy and I said, hey, Billy, I'd love to know what you know, but eventually do it better, right? Because I was young and I figured that was the best thing to say. And he said, all right, smart ass kid. He said, come sit next to me when I do my next pitch. You're going to see one by one how I pick off each person in the audience. I'm going to start with the wives. I'm going to hit the husbands. The kids are going to want to do all the, play with the mop. He said, you'll see it. And then I'm going to hit them with an offer they can't refuse. And
So
again,
you
that
just
went
walked
kind
up
of
to him. So you were just a stranger. You just walked up to him and said, "Hey man, show me how you
kind
do
of
this."
strange because we were all from McKees Rocks. My father knew him. Ironically, his
Okay.
mother leased her property to my grandfather to put his insurance company in when he wasn't doing magic. So
Okay.
we all knew of each other, right? And I was
Okay.
this little punk kid, I guess.
All
And
right.
so here's what happened is I got up on stage and I got to see him do this. And within 10 minutes of him doing this orchestra of awesome, you truly had everyone stepping over each other to buy 2 of these mops. And it really made me think as a kid, what's he doing? So here I ended up going into, I did sales early. I started telemarketing at 15. My mom used to drive me to work as a telemarketer before I could even get a car. I mean, that's how early I wanted to get into business. And
How come you didn't work for your dad? Why didn't you just work for your dad?
I did for 12 years. And then I realized
Oh.
that I couldn't own it. I couldn't run it. He was always going to be that guy. And we
Oh.
butt heads a lot. I mean, I love my dad. Thank God I had him and he drove me to be who I was. But at that time in my life, it was, I was kind of a know-it-all kid. And
I see.
my dad wasn't a kid that went to college or school. So, here I went to psych school. I worked with rats in a Skinner box and I understood what he was doing to people where he was calling it door in the face or, foot in the door technique. And it's like, well, okay, Dad, but there's a reason that works. And here's the psychology behind it. Oh, you think you're so smart. So we had one of those relationships. Like, well, why'd you make me go to college then? We always had that thing. But basically because I ended up going to school and working with rats in a Skinner box and learning psychology, I was able to kind of put together a framework that I took into his company, and I ended up killing it as a salesperson. His company, I was the number 1 rep nationally. And then at a certain point, like that's where I realized I couldn't go any further. Right?
I see. He wasn't going to let you. He wasn't going to let you be CEO.
He wasn't going to let me be CEO. And I got into, at that point, when I was working, I think it was the 10th or 11th year I was there, I started working within a new technology division, and I got to experience technology. And it was from that point then I started looking for a way into software, data, technology somehow. And when I saw that opportunity, I ended up moving to California, started a tech company. And then from there, I was always an entrepreneur. I never looked back.
What was the tech company? Give us the short version. What was the tech company, and did you bootstrap it? What'd you do? Give us.
Yeah,
the
we
short version.
bootstrapped her. I took out my 401k. I
Wow.
negotiated with my dad's company that I wouldn't take I built a training program for that. Actually, it's a funny story. Where the final point was at my dad's company, it was called Guardian Protection Services, was I built, because I was the best sales rep, I took all the psychology that I ever learned, and I built really a framework for anyone to sell at like probably 80, 90% close, because I knew exactly what the person across the table needed to hear over time. And then, what research proves that if you just do this, you're going to get where you need to go. Yep. And my father said, do it. And it was like the greatest moment of my life. Like, this is my Super Bowl. So it took me 3 months. I learned Photoshop. I went through all the research. I tied everything back. Like, it was going to be, this is going to be the holy grail for your company, Dad. And I laid it down. I remember the day I laid it down in front of him, and he said, "What's this?" I said, "This is the training manual that you told me to build." And he goes, "Oh, yeah. We decided not to do that." And I said, "Who's we?" Because I never heard we when it came to the decision at his company. He was we. Right there, I knew something was up. And I said, "What do you mean we?" He says, I decided you're not going to do that because I don't want anyone to think I gave my kid a favor." And I remember looking at him and just going blank and thinking, how am I going to get this? And I said, "You know what? ADT will buy it off me." That was his biggest competitor. And I picked it up, and he said, "Good luck." Well, here, his parent company came back about 3 weeks later after they had got word of this, and they said, "Give him money to get out of it. We need him to sign a no compete here. He never had one. We'll give him $30,000. Give us that manual back."
There you go. There's your seed. There was your seed money for the tech company. Boom.
Peace out. Right. So I took that, my 401k, and what happened was we rented a house in Palm Springs, and I took a bunch.
Were you married?
Well, no, we meaning I always collectively say we. I should say I. It ended up being me and my brother that were. There was 3 original founders. Me, I brought in my brother. I called him a co-founder, and then this other partner, Dan. And basically, what happened was I got about $80,000 total, I think, and then started raising money from there. But basically, what we did is we got into data, emailing, and then we ran into problems within 3 months of launching. We actually got blacklisted on every server. So Gmail, Hotmail, Yahoo, they blacklisted it, which means that you can't use your servers. It's like driving a lemon. It's always going to be, it's always going to be a problem. So we had to find something else to do with the server. And we went back and solved the problem that got us into that mess. And what happened was after we did that, we realized, wow, we have something here. Right. Let's go out and let's find ways to integrate this. So here, AutoZone, it was made public that AutoZone also got blacklisted because they had people filling out slips at the home shows by hand, and then they had our sales rep going in and inputting them into a system. Well, Google doesn't like if you misspell Google or Gmail or a name, they flag it. Well, if you have too many of those when you send out an email list, you get blacklisted over time. So we found out they got blacklisted. We went straight to them and said, look, we'll do this for free. We need the press.
Yep.
Let's see if we could make lemonade out of these lemons. And we did that. And we knew we had a model, and we went out and,
and then you had,
2 years later, we had letters.
Then you had AutoZone. Then you had the AutoZone logo on your website. Boom, you're off to the races.
Exactly. I mean, and looking back then, we thought it was the end of the world. And, fast forward 2 years later, we have thank you letters from Yahoo that says, you guys have some of the cleanest data that we've ever obtained.
Wow.
So
Wow.
So that was kind of how I got started as an entrepreneur and learned how to raise money, learned how to pull a team together, learned how to get over a lot of the problems that you see as a early entrepreneur, because you're going to have them. It depends on how you react. So that's kind of how I got into doing it myself. And then from there, I always looked for new industries that I could kind of jump in and look for a problem that hasn't been solved yet. Because I was in California, I got to see how people reacted when they were exposed to medical marijuana. And then I remember being at a playground, and there was a mother that had a stroller with a kid in it. She pulled out a joint and started smoking it. And there was a cop on the other side of the playground, and no one cared. No one said anything. To me, it was mind blowing. Because in Pennsylvania, you couldn't even say the word marijuana without fear.
What year was this?
This was probably 2008 or 2009.
Okay. All right.
And
now had you already exited the tech company and you were looking for
I saw it when I was with the tech company. What happened was then I brought the tech company back to Pittsburgh. Around 2013, 2014, I had a future business partner call me and say, hey, listen, it's looking like medical marijuana is coming to the East Coast. And there's a group of mothers that are all out fighting for legalization, that each one of their kids has severe epilepsy or some sort of seizure disorder.
Okay.
I think we can help them because they're not business people. And we then went and kind of broke down all the different state programs and figured out what Pennsylvania should look like. And we put a brand together, and we went out and we tried to team up with these moms. And this kind of gets into how I got into the medical marijuana industry. So it's a good story. So I'll kind of tell you.
Okay. Yeah.
I'll get through it. But what happened was when we approached the moms, they didn't like business people. They weren't in it for that. They were in it to save their kids.
Exactly.
And they kind of looked at us like we were bad guys. But we stuck around, and we ended up going to a fundraiser at one of the highest profile patients' houses. And her name was Hannah. She was 11 years old. She has about 10,000 seizures a year. And she had a grand mal seizure just right in the middle of the party. And I saw this poor girl seize and go headfirst into the concrete. And the sound was sickening. The sight was sickening. The way that people reacted it was crazy. The ambulance came. Half the people left scared to death. Half the people were so desensitized that they were like, hey, I'll get another drink. Or, did you try the chicken on the buffet? And as a psych guy, I started thinking, wow, they see these seizures so much that they're that desensitized. This girl literally had this traumatic thing where I guarantee she has a concussion to boot. And here, they were desensitized. So I left that party. I went about my way. I didn't really think about it too much because I had a lot of stuff going on. Here, I got a call from my business partner 2 weeks later. He said, hey, look, they just sent Hannah back home from the hospital. They told her to start hospice. She has 2 weeks left. Her organs are shutting down. You have to find her this oil. And back then that was, 2014. So we didn't have access to the stuff. And not only that, we didn't have access to stuff that was heavy metal free and lab tested and all the things that we would want to do before we gave it to this little girl. So here I picked up the phone and I called every single person in every legal state that I knew, California, Colorado, Alaska, every one of them. I pulled all the stops. And here I got on the phone with another mother that was funding research at a major university on the East Coast. She called the researcher, threatened to pull his research money if he didn't get me this special compound, special ratio of CBD and THC. And here he overnighted it with about 11 days left on the death sentence. She was given 1 drop. So at the time she had a feeding tube in, she was immobile on her side for days. I mean, this was end of life. 1 drop, the size of about a grain of rice. And within 7 minutes, she was up swiping at the feeding tube to get it out. And within half an hour, she had so much energy and she was running around. Her parents had to put a helmet on her. Wow. And that was October of 2014. They never looked back. We ended up together forming the Pennsylvania Medical Cannabis Society as a nonprofit to go out and now educate, because we saw that as the major problem next.
I see.
They need to start buying into this. When you see someone saved by this stuff, there's no looking back. So that day is where I got out of tech. Like literally that minute when I realized you could save people. And there's something to that. So I sold the rest of the company to my brother, and I used that to then jump into the marijuana industry. And from there, I ended up winning 3 dispensary licenses in Pennsylvania. Moving on to West Virginia, a full vertical, a grow, process, and a dispense. And then from there, because I was in the medical cannabis industry, that had the society, and I was speaking, and I probably spoke at 50 different events all over the world. You pick up all kinds of things. You hear what the researchers are looking for, where there's, it's falling short. The doctors, parents, caretakers, scientists, data analysts. There really wasn't information that these people are used to looking to make a informed decision on what they should do regarding this plant. So I figured, let's go out and create it. And when you sit at a spectroscopy convention as the guy that's supposed to speak when you're not a science guy, and you hear these questions, you say, okay, well, let me find out about that. Well, I built a network of some of the smartest people in cannabis, and slowly it evolved into, hey, we could do a biotech company where we separate the molecules, we integrate the data, we monitor this stuff, we'll tie in with universities. All the stuff that I was kind of piecemealing together through the society, and just in my days just being around it. And once I had problems that I could solve, it was real easy to jump into the next level. And that's kind of always been the thing: look for the problem, find a solution, and jump in. And
so there was no master plan to build a biotech company in the beginning. That just kind of formulated over time. I see.
It started over time. And actually, what happened was once I was fully entrenched in marijuana and saw those needs, it became data. I was looking for the data, right? He who holds the data at the end wins.
Do you still have the dispensary and the grows and all that, or did you sell all that off?
Yeah, I don't manage any of it. I don't do the day-to-day operations. Here we're here at the biotech now. We got a studio set up. We got the lab. We do all that. But that's full time now.
Are those all separate entities, same companies?
How do you all separate entities?
Okay, I didn't know if
it
rolled
all
up
separate entities.
I gotcha. Okay. Very good. But you're having somebody else run the day-to-day. Same thing for Hemp Synergistics, right? You have a CEO running it, and you're not running the day-to-day, or are you?
No, basically what it is if you look at an org chart, you have the CEO and everyone down. I'm over here as the visionary, and him and I put heads together every single day. Here's what we're going to do. Because we have a really good, we have complementary styles. And one of the things I learned is I don't know what I don't know. Right. I was a young guy. I'm still a young guy, but that's what the first 20 years of learning, I learned, okay, you don't know what you don't know. So bring in people that are smarter than you, bring in people that have done it before, so that it's you're a question away, as opposed to trying to figure it out, which back when I was young, I liked to figure it out, to try to prove something. Now it says, hey, we call Dan the Oracle, our CEO, because he knows everything. If you have to pose the question properly, and the answer's in there.
By the way, I picked up on the fact that you're all about making sure you surround yourself with the right talent early on. Because when I was stalking you, preparing for the podcast and looking at all your stuff, I saw some of the people that you had recruited to run some of your things, and I'm like, okay, yeah, he's serious about making sure that he gets the right talent to run the day to day.
I learned from the first few, because we did it with a Rat Pack team each time before, right? Now I know, bring in people that have been there, done that, and the problems aren't problems as long as they were before, right? So with the Rat Pack, you come up with a problem. It's like, wow, we got to kind of roll up our sleeves and figure this out. Now it's your question away typically. So it's nice.
Will you give the listeners kind of the 3 to 5 minute elevator pitch on Hemp Synergistics as it stands today? Go for it.
Yeah. So if you look at just the hemp industry in general, cannabis industry, they're kind of the same, because we're talking about molecules at that point. There's always been a problem with delivery forms. There's been a problem with how the ingredient works with different things like food and capsules. It's not like your typical vitamin B powder where you just pour it in and you only need this much and you can compound it with other things. It's an oil that's viscous. It's not standardized. It has chemicals in it through through the extraction process. It has smells. It's bitter. It's not ideal for a lot of industries. So what Hemp Synergistics is focused on is looking at major problems in the big industries just that are sitting on the sidelines or just putting a toe in right now.
Okay.
So you have food and beverage, which is the big monster. You have nutraceutical. You also have law enforcement, which has all kinds of problems that are now coming to fruition because you have hemp that's been federally legalized. So people are driving around with what looks like marijuana, smells like marijuana, tastes like marijuana, but it's completely legal under the new Farm Bill. Police officers are trained that you're lying. They're trained to think you're lying. So when you say, well, this is CBD, they say, yeah, right. The lab test will figure it out. To get to that point, there's 8 months in queue at a state crime lab. And then there's $800 before someone can tell you that it's legal.
Wow.
So if you look at the three major problems we look to solve, law enforcement has that as a problem. So what we did was we patented with Purdue University Northwest a field unit that for $14 on the hood of a car, a police officer could take the hemp, grind it up, put it in a little shaker with some chemicals, and within 90 seconds, via a color match test, tell you exactly how much THC is in there. Not even just pass, fail. It literally says, here's much is in it.
Holy, okay, let's just take a pause right there. Take a deep breath. Patented device that you could sell to every precinct across the country.
Yep.
Holy, how many, like, is it just in Pennsylvania? Do you have that?
No, so it's cool. So we just launched it. We launched in January. To give you an idea, within about 45 days, we were on the docket to propose to this, to present to this state Senate of the state of Indiana. We had to go sit and answer questions and do all this, like basically, show the research, show the testing we've done, show how it works, because they want to implement it into the state program as legislation that if somebody gets pulled over, it has to run through this test before there's all kinds of pressure and weight put on the state crime lab system.
Oh man, okay. So
and the state crime labs are fighting it because they want the business. Right.
I see. I was just about to ask you who gets hurt in this deal. Yeah. Is there revenue? Who loses? Right.
Yeah. The state crime labs.
Okay. But if it is passed, if legislation is passed and you got the patent on it, I mean, home run, my friend.
Yep. Yeah. And it's really interesting when you do stuff with IP, because if you can go out there and prove concept with it, and you have lockdown, I mean, I hate to say lockdown, nothing's ever locked down, but IP that's enforceable, you're in a good position if it's a huge problem. Like you said, every police officer in the country should have this, and maybe someday will.
Yes.
So right now we have a couple big companies that are looking at coming in and taking that IP because they already have distribution within those systems.
I see. Okay. That's a win too. Okay.
Oh, that'll be a huge win. Yeah,
okay. Now, but as far as the rest of your business, are you, tell us about the powder.
Yeah. Sorry. So I usually start with those and then go into.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. I didn't mean to get you off.
It's okay. My fault. So imagine that you wanted to put hemp or marijuana into food, and you may have eaten a marijuana brownie. It tastes like marijuana. It smells like it. People kind of want that because they're going for the high. They want to make sure that what they paid for is in there. And it's always been the marijuana enthusiasts that have no problem with that. But if Oreo cookie, which they have been talking about, it wants to put CBD into an Oreo cookie, they want the Oreo cookie to taste like the age-old recipe that they built a brand around.
Okay.
They don't want it to taste. They don't want it to smell. They don't want to have to change the recipe. They don't want to change anything. So what we did was we took the distillate, which, you see what it looks like in a vape pen. It's that very viscous oil.
Yes.
It's like glue, which you can't mix. You can't dose. When you do put that into food, it smells bad. It's bitter. When you taste it, it has like this just bitter, bad, and it kind of ruins your taste buds for a little bit.
Okay.
What we did is we took a helix structure polysaccharide and we impregnated it with the CBD molecule with whatever cannabinoids we want. We took away the smell, took away the taste, and we made it so you could literally pour it like flour. Now it's in a form that food manufacturers are used to using. All they do is they do the recipe as usual, pour it in, mix it, and now boom, you have an even 25 milligrams of CBD per dose. They can't taste it, they can't smell it, and your recipe is intact.
Is this a patented, protected, processed product?
Absolutely. Otherwise, I wouldn't be saying it yet. We just filed it. We had the provision all year. We just filed the final patent, and so we're
same thing. I mean, what? So Nabisco or I don't know, Frito-Lay, whoever. I mean, all these companies now they're calling you to get that material, right?
Correct. And that's who we're dealing with are the tier one food manufacturers. The big guns.
Yeah. Are you going to
They're gonna-
supply? Are you going to be a manufacturer and supplier? Or are you going to sell and license the process and let them do it in their factories? What are you going to do?
So
there?
in the CBD and within the CBD within the CBD industry under the Farm Bill program, we can sell it to anybody as is. So we'll be the manufacturer for anything that's not THC related.
Okay.
What we are doing right now, we're in the process of finding partners within each of the state programs, so that, for instance, in California, where you have all these different chocolate manufacturers, the rules are a lot looser. We could go to one manufacturer, license the technology, have them do it, and now we have a manufacturing plant within that state that could make this powderized, 55% solution. That's 2.5 times stronger than everybody else, doesn't taste, et cetera, et cetera. So that's how that'll work. Ultimately, what's going to happen is one of these tier ones are going to come in and buy that IP so that none of the competitors could have it. That's what our plan is. So
I see. So Coca-Cola or anybody else, like for example, these drinks that I see on the shelf right now with CBD in them, that's for like, where are those bottlers or manufacturers, where are they buying that? And how's that different from what you would sell a food and beverage?
That's actually a great question. I'm glad we got there. This is another reason why we built it. They would have to use nano. So with CBD, I could be any drink manufacturer. I could just take water and pour CBD into it, mix it up, make sure I have a compliant label, and I'm good. The problem is that the powderized technology that's been what the industry has seen to date is called nanotechnology.
Okay.
We don't know how safe it is. People are making all kinds of claims from people that run a biotech facility. We can tell you that for every CBD molecule, you're getting 5 to 8 chemicals attached to that molecule. So that's how nano is working. You basically beat the hell out of the CBD, I should say the distillate, to the point with a sonicator. It moves so fast it'll vaporize ice within a couple seconds. It'll make your teeth hurt if you're standing near it. That's how fast it vibrates. So it shakes it to death, breaks the molecules up real small, and then they bond around the outside of all the chemicals bond around the outside. So now that becomes water soluble. It's not safe. We don't know what the research is going to end up showing, if people actually do research it. A lot of other countries have made it where you have to list that there's nanotechnology on the product because they don't know what's going to happen yet. And we think the big problem is a nanoparticle is like 50 nanometers, which is really small. It's seeping into plastic. It's getting through the blood-brain barrier. It's bringing chemicals in with it. So nano's a problem, and that's what people have been using. On top of that, it tastes like crap. I have a video online that I did where I take a sip of it and I literally spit it out on video because it's that bad. A little bit, dramatic, and that was the plan. But, that's what they would do.
Is your goal with Hemp Synergistics then? Is it like, hey, we're going to create this IP, we're going to create this product, we're going to sell that off, but Hemp Synergistics, the biotech company, the consulting firm, continues to develop and create new things, and then maybe we sell that too? Is that the plan?
Correct.
Okay.
What we'll do is we'll act as a manufacturer for these until we can't, right?
Okay.
And then we go out to certain contract manufacturers for things, and then if someone wants to come in and buy that technology, for the right price, we'll do it. Our timing's good because the industry is just starting to grow up. You have a lot of people that are what I call first waivers that jumped in early. You might have a guy that knew a little bit about science and knew how to buy, and knew enough to buy an extractor, could operate a commercial grade washing machine. And that's as difficult as these, first wave extraction systems. That's as difficult as they were to operate. Now we're getting into a whole different level of science, molecules being separated, different technology being added to it. So we're what we call the second wave of the industry, and that's where it's headed.
Do you think long-term that farms across the country will be, it's a massive, giant crop as big as, maybe not as big as corn, but a huge crop across the country, and then food and beverage companies will take over all of the manufacturing of any type of powder? And is that where it's headed?
Well, the big problem with food, let's say Coca-Cola wants to get in it. Their big problem is they need to control the supply, like you're leading on to, and they have to make sure they're getting enough to be able to start putting money into advertising and packaging and all this stuff to put it out worldwide. I think what's going to happen is you're going to see farmers that do it because it's good for their farm in general. They're not going to make as much as they've been making. And much like you see with tomatoes or sugar, you're going to have these large, companies contract out and have these farmers locked in. What we're doing is we're doing the same thing with the farmers, bringing it through our system, changing it into powder, and then selling it to these guys. We always said if Coca-Cola was going to get into this, they're going to put a manufacturing facility right in Atlanta. They're going to source it from as close as they can because it keeps the cost down and make sure they can get enough of it. And that's going to be that processing center. Whether they're going to have someone like us come in and set that up because we have the expertise in it, and we just make sure that they're getting as much as they need and it's meeting spec, or they do it themselves. We'll see. But I think that's where they buy a company, right? We're not going to learn this from scratch. You guys do it. You do it right. Now we want you to do it for us.
Is that your goal, to sell the whole thing eventually, or are you just having fun building it right now?
Well, I'll tell you, if you look at my past, I usually stay in stuff for about 3 or 4 years before I find the next thing to do. Our goal is to build it and exit to somebody big and then do something else. Where we will probably be headed next is psilocybin mushrooms.
Okay. Are you going to move to Colorado and open and do that? Because that's where the foundation is, right?
Well, if you look at how cannabis was legalized in 1996 in California, then it went, Alaska, Colorado, Oregon, started moving, now PA has it. Psychedelics are right there. They just got decriminalized in places in California, places in Colorado. That's coming. So now that Johns Hopkins is getting research, you have Kevin O'Leary that's getting into it. It's happening, and it's gonna, and not only that, the proof is in the pudding. I mean, this is wiping out depression. It's wiping out PTSD in like one dose. People are quitting smoking after 3 doses. I mean, I think it's like an 80% recovery rate on, or quit rate on just 3 doses of mushrooms related to cigarettes. So I know that that's coming next, and I can't lie. That's where I'm looking. That's where I'm headed.
Do you happen to know Del Jolly or Heather Jackson at all? Either one of those
personally, no.
Okay. Well, they're heading up some stuff in Colorado on psychedelics. So I was wondering. Okay, so that's where you're headed next. Now, but you're still majority owner in the other entities, or a large, unit holder. I don't know how that works. But.
Yeah. So it's at a certain point, you as a founder, you have all this, right? When you want to sell and start moving your way out, you sell, right? In certain parts of it.
Certain parts. Okay.
The tech company I sold off to my brother, the marijuana companies, I still have pieces of.
Okay.
But like I said, I don't have to do any of the day to day, and check in with them a little bit here and there. If we do go into another state, I'll jump back in, and that's where I'm strong.
How do you find time? Are you married, family, kids, social life?
Well, so the time thing was an issue. I got married and I got divorced in 6 months because he was telling me, she verbatim said to me, and I remember the day. She said, if this is what it means to be an entrepreneur, I'd rather you go do something else.
And you're like, well, sorry.
Just like looking at her where I'm like glossing over. I'm thinking, how the hell am I going to get out of this one? That was it. 6 months later, divorce.
How do you find the time to do everything that you're involved in and write a book, which I want you to go into next?
Yeah.
But first, let's talk about the time question. How do you?
First thing is turn off the TV. That's people watch TV. They don't realize they get caught up in TV for 4 hours at night. I cut TV out in 2014. That is a big thing, right?
Yep.
On top of that, I mean, you got to want it. You got to pick a goal, and you just got to say, I got to do it. A lot of my life before I got to this point was a lot of half-finished projects, because it was like, I want to learn how to do stuff. I want to figure it out. And it's like, maybe I didn't think about how much time this is going to take up. Now, when I want to do something, I realize it's going to take this much time. You got to put your head down and you got to do it. And if you're going to do it, commit to it and get it done. And, when you do that and you visualize and have a vision board and stuff, you do get stuff done. But cutting out TV, cutting off all the crap. I cut out anything fiction. Like people say, do you read? I say, yeah, unless it's fiction. Like I don't have time for fiction in my life.
Right.
So I think that's the major thing is time. Changing your sleep schedule. I've done polyphasic sleep, which is where you sleep for 20 minutes every 4 hours around the clock. I did that for 1.5 years.
Really?
I mean, that means you're up for 22 hours. It was the greatest thing I've ever done in my life. Really? But the problem is the rest of the world doesn't operate like that. So where I'm up at 3 o'clock in the morning doing yoga and writing a book and, taking in more information, the rest of the world's sleeping. Then what happens is they get up and you got to take these intermittent naps, and it's weird. People think it's weird. But I'll tell you, there's a whole nother level of consciousness that you hit when you are up for 22 hours and the rest of the world is asleep. But what's neat about it is you could literally close when you're at the end of your 4-hour cycle. I mean, you literally feel your eyes going into REM. You close your eyes, and about 8 to 12 minutes later, you feel like you had 8 hours of sleep. I mean, it's the most amazing thing in the world. But that's it. It comes down to time. You got to figure out how to make more of it, right?
Tell me about the book. Why did you decide to write the book, and then what is the book about? Go for it.
So I told you that story about how my dad, I wrote that training program for the company, and I didn't want that to go to waste, right? So it took all this stuff. I did all this research. I had it. So that was always sitting in the back of my mind. Someday you're going to turn that into a book.
I see.
What happened was I started writing the book, got done with it. And then after I was done, I'm a Virgo. We're perfectionists, right? Like we internalize, and I started thinking, you know what? I can't put in this. It just makes me it sounds like I'm just trying to be smart. I said, I need to make this so that people can apply it and follow a system, right? Because ultimately I'm a systems builder at heart. That's what I like to do. So I went back and I said, okay, well, what are you doing here? And I literally built a framework that's 5 steps. And then within each of those 5 steps, you have certain things you need to pay attention to. But if you follow that, I am certain that whatever your goal is in the beginning, whether that's to raise money, it's to sell a deal, to get your dog to sit, like whatever it is, you have a goal, then you do the framework. You're going to get chances of you getting what you want is 90%. And I'll tell you, I've spoken all over the country now. I have, my disciples, I should say, that follow it to a T, that, call me every other day. Oh my God, I used molecular influence on this. I used molecular influence on that. And, it makes me smile because I know exactly what they're thinking. I know exactly how they did it. And I know exactly what's happening to the person across from them. And it's a pretty awesome weapon.
Molecular influence, by the way, and for the listeners, can they go to molecularinfluence.com or Amazon? How do you?
If you go to molecularinfluence.com, there's a link to buy the book, and it takes you right over to Amazon.
It takes you right over to Amazon, and it's out for sale right now, launched, ready
out
to
for
roll.
Sale. Formal launch isn't until August because I have a formal launch party and all that. But we have it up and it's ready, and you can buy it and read it. Got the Kindle version up there too.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
But what it comes down to is, what I learned from Billy Mays, my father and my grandfather, is truly how to pick that goal, like I said, and set up the room so that at the end of the day, they see what you want them to see. And it's pretty awesome to read your good stories.
By the way, was your grandfather, was he, when you say magician, like for a living or for a hobby?
No, he was an insurance agent by day, magician by night. So he made money as a magician, but it wasn't his full-time thing.
Was he a pretty heavy influence on your life, your granddad?
Probably the biggest influence on my life, I would say. It's funny because I looked at the contrast between him and my father. My father would say, I don't know why you're out doing all that magic stuff. You don't make all kinds of money on it. And then I would hear Pap say, but this is what I like to do. I like to make people laugh. And I gravitated towards that. And he used to bring me to funerals. I was the oldest grandson, so I kind of palled around with him. And he would do card tricks at funerals. And I said, Pap, people are here to be sad. And he said, no, I'm here to make people laugh. And you'll see that when I die, people are going to come to my funeral because I came to theirs. And I was a smart ass kid. And I said, wow, all your friends are dying. Like no one will be left. Haha. And here to be able to see then 20 years later, he died and he had 96 cars in his funeral procession. The funeral home said they've never seen that before. I mean, we're Italians, so you see a lot of people, but never 96. And that really hit me. And I said, you know what? At the end of the day, that was that one piece of information that he gave me that I'm going to take to the bank because I saw it. The data is there. So
are you close to
towards Pap?
Are you close to your dad now, though? Are you and your dad repaired?
Super close now.
Okay.
Once I proved myself, there was a changing of things,
He's still alive?
He's still alive. Yeah. And he stays on top of me every single day.
I was going to say, does he call you or do you call him and you're like, hey, listen, I got this new situation that I haven't faced yet. Have you?
Yeah. And usually he'll turn around and give me the same advice he already has. Like, get tough, toughen up, figure it out. You can do it. Things like that. He's got, my father was a welder by trade before he got into what he got into.
I see.
And so, his advice is very, work ethic related. He goes back to that a lot. And, that's where I kind of get this. If I'm up, I better be working because, dad's going to yell at me. And that's been since I was 15. That's how I thought. And, that's how I live. So.
What year was he born?
My dad, 54.
He was born in 54. Yeah. I mean, the older guys, they just cut from a different cloth, man. You're absolutely, I have the exact same feeling at the age of 54, even today. And my dad's 84 years old. I still kind of have him like, if I'm not busting my ass, like if I don't work at least 12 hours in the day, like he might call me or something. Like, I feel like, he's like right there watching, like
Dad's watching.
Yeah.
It's nice, kind of, right? Like it keeps you going.
It does. No, I totally agree. Let me ask you a couple of questions here as we head towards wrap up around being an entrepreneur. So a lot of our listeners are either aspiring entrepreneurs or early in startup life. But let's talk to the ones that want to start something. They want to quit their job. They want to start a business, but they're scared. They're nervous, or maybe they don't have the money. What would you say to anybody listening right now that wants to start something but hasn't?
Number one, pick a goal, right? Stay focused on the goal. When things come up that get in the way of that, or that you have to react to, be ready to react, but always keep an eye on that goal. And I like to look back like American Gladiators. You're old enough to remember that, when they would have that obstacle course where the gladiators were shooting at everyone and you had to run from thing to thing. Their goal is to get there. They're being shot at. There's all this stuff happening. But if you stay focused and you're always looking at where you're headed, like, you got stuff coming out, you got to dodge and bob and weave. But, know that's going to happen, and know that you might have to change your model for it to happen. And you're going to have competitors that come up and scare the crap out of you that may have something close. Competition is good. Like, so there's a lot of things that as long as you have that goal in your head and you're always going towards it, I think that's super important. And just be ready for the problems that are going to happen, so that when they do happen, you can react, you could make a decision, and you're not thinking it's the end of the world.
Are you a fan of bootstrapping and putting in cash yourself at first, or raising cash early? What are your thoughts on
that's half my problem. That's my problem, is I'm a startup junkie, right? And I want to do it myself. And that was always, and that came from my father. You never, why would you want to work for someone? You got to do it yourself. You got to own it all. And there's a certain strategy to getting there. And, I like being in control of things as long as I can. But I'm big on bootstrapping. I mean, you can do it. You can start small. You're in control of everything. And as long as you keep that lean mentality, you can do a lot of things with a little bit of money.
So bootstrap, if you can, stay in control for as long as you can, and then raise cash when you need to, and then start selling off pieces as you move along.
Bootstrap until you proved concept, right? And you have one client that you could look at. Then you've proved authority. You've proved that this is actually going to work. You have all kinds of clout in a negotiation at that point. A lot of people try to go to things with an idea. That's when investors are going to turn around and spank you. They're going to ask you questions that you can't answer. It's a more difficult road if you don't prove concept first.
Do you like raising cash, or you hate that part of it, or
I'll tell you what, I'm proud of myself that I can do it, because not everybody can do it from an idea, really. But it's a pain in the ass. You know what I mean? It's really a pain in the ass. And then you got people that, have an opinion, all the time and stuff. But, you get smarter with that too, as you do it more times, But now that this is my third or fourth time raising money, I know exactly what investors I want. I know exactly where to find them. I know exactly what increments to do it in. I know how the series are going to go, so that I'm in control, longer than I was the last time, or whatever it is. You learn as you go. And, you got to pay attention to that stuff too, because a lot of guys, at the end of the day, they don't own their company, and they don't have a say anymore.
I had a good friend of mine who owned a cannabis company here in Denver. And one of the things he used to tell me is like, Steve, my cap table has 95 people on it. And if there's one thing I'd do differently, I'd never let it happen again, because it consumes all of my time.
Yeah. And in the marijuana industry specifically, you got a lot of unsavvy investors, I'll call them. Their accountants said no, their attorneys said no, and they just said, well, I'm doing it. So you see a lot of people that haven't done this before. They don't know what questions to ask. And then once the money's exchanged and documents are signed, they want in on, board meetings and all these things that they just thought they would get access to. And, so you got to watch that kind of stuff. And that happens in the marijuana industry, because the guys that say, I don't care, to my accountant and my lawyer, are usually the guys that, I don't want to say usually, but a lot of the guys that don't know what they're talking about. So you see that in that marijuana industry specifically.
Are your parents okay with cannabis now? Your mom and dad?
Yeah, I remember the day my mom showed up at my house and said, she knocked on the door at a weird time. I did not expect her to be here because I lived 45 minutes away. I opened the door. I said, Mom. And she said, are there any kids in this house? I said, no, why? She said, you're in the marijuana industry. And it was cool because, they were anti big time. And I had about a 2-hour conversation with her, and I told her about Hannah, and I told her about where we headed with it, and started the medical cannabis side. Like, I did a lot of work before I even told her about it.
Really?
And it's funny because that night she went home. My father was watching TV. Him and I were not getting along at this point in my life.
Okay.
And she went in and he said, I'm sorry, he's staring at the TV. Didn't even make eye contact with her. He says, do you know what your son is getting into? He said, yeah, I just talked to him about it. And she said, I want to know how I have access to my half of the money because I want to invest.
Oh,
that was the moment where a lot changed in my life with my parents, because she bought into it and he started thinking, what the heck? And then about a year later, he came around, and now he's the biggest advocate for it. So
how about that? How about now? Let me go further. Can you go to mom and dad's for Thanksgiving and have some edibles and maybe light a joint in the backyard? Or
I mean,
not?
it is, put it this way, we are living in California at my parents' house these days. There's no stigma at all anymore.
Right.
For instance, I used to smoke cigarettes like coming out of college, and I smoked for a while. Once I integrated marijuana in my life, I quit it. We saw what happened with Hannah. I had a very bad frontal lobe injury for about 5 years. Cannabis was the only thing that helped. Doctors told me I had ADHD, severe ADHD. Cannabis fixed it. My mother's in pain. She has glaucoma. She has a lot of eye problems. A couple drops of THC takes away that pressure, can get her through the day. My father has all kinds of surgeries and stuff he's dealing with. He says no more Percocet, none of that stuff. I'll be fine with CBD or THC. And so, it's really my other brothers and sisters that haven't come around yet. Mostly.
Oh, really?
They have kids and they still have that stigma in their head. But
okay.
Yeah, everybody's come around.
Now, what your dad never told you is, so let's see, if your dad was born in 54, so 69, he was like 16, if I'm doing the math right, or something like that.
Yeah.
So what he never told you was in 69 and 70, he was probably doing all kinds of cannabis.
What's funny is my dad, believe it or not, was so straight edge that he actually turned in people that had marijuana. That's how bad he was. Him and his brother had a pact their whole life. If either one of us sees each other smoking dope, we're gonna beat their ass. So he was real anti. So
I grew up in Oklahoma. Same thing. My dad, we lived out on a farm, and they used to the potheads used to grow it down on the creek line. I guess it was the
good
way
for
the
water,
ground or the soil or whatever. And my dad would drive down there with his shotgun and run off the dopers, he'd call them. He'd come back to the house feeling super proud because he ran off the hippies. I'm like, okay, Dad.
That's funny.
Two final questions. If you could call the young man in West Virginia on graduation day, I'm guessing you were 21 or whatever.
Yeah.
If you could go back in time and call him, what would you tell him now?
I would say the most important thing that I learned, that I know now that I didn't understand then, is learn how to visualize. I mean, that has literally changed the way I think and the way I go at things and the way I achieve things. Because again, when you can see it, you can create it. And if you can believe that you can create it, you can do it. Then it comes down to time, energy, and are you going to, put all that towards it to get it done. But you can truly achieve anything. And it's not just, here and that, like people say, I can achieve anything. Yeah, it goes in one ear and out the other. How you do it, you visualize, you stay on track. So I think that's probably the most important thing I would tell myself is that, and also you don't know everything, Russ. You think you do. You don't.
How about this last question? If you could put your core purpose in life into a sentence, if you could frame that into a sentence, what would that sound like?
Well, that's a tough one. My core purpose in one sentence.
Yeah. Why is Russ walking around on this blue ball in black space?
I mean, honestly, I would say to influence certain things, right? So I'm the kind, and if you look at like marijuana industry as an example, it was time. Pennsylvania needed to hear about it. Someone had to jump up and do that. Because of my background in psychology and magic and Billy Mays and all that stuff, I know how to kind of have that conversation with anybody, even when I'm hit with radical opposition. And I thrive in that environment because I'm seeing what the brain is across from me is thinking at that, at that moment. And I'm able to, like I talk about in the book, the brain works like Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Well, if we present the brain A and B, it's going to compute C automatically. So you have the ability to I hate to use word manipulate, but you can kind of take, if they know A or they're sticking on A, you can integrate B at a certain point and they're going to have that C in their head. And I think, knowing how to do that and being able to do that is a superpower, really. And I think that plays with a lot of things.
Especially when it comes to raising cash. Closing deals, just, helping people out. And I like to help people out. And a lot of that comes down to, look, I'm not able to get X. And it's like, okay, well, let's roll up our sleeves. Let's get into how we're going to do that by having a conversation. And so I think that's probably my thing. I have a feeling that if we ever got into a fight with China and we were about to go to war, we could just send Russ over there and he'd just make it all better.
What's funny is I've gone through that in my head and I think, so what, if I'm sitting across the table from a world leader, like I got to be likable. He's got to see that, we're on the same page, always smile. Like, how are these guys not doing it? And now I know it's just all to support the war machine. So it's tough to get around, but yeah, I'm with you on that.
Hemp Synergistics.com, also the book molecularinfluence.com. Russ, thank you so much for being on the Riderflex podcast.
Oh, it was good being here. Appreciate it. Yeah, I appreciate you having me.
You need to come back to the show and do it again soon, my friend. I could talk to you for another 2 hours.
Keep me posted. Next time we'll dive into my hiring strategy based around zodiac sign.